Hi, welcome to Crafting a Country Life. I'm Andrea, and I'm going to share today some ideas for adding texture into paper crafting and a couple of other ideas as well. I worked on a little felt heart yesterday, and I started out with a purchased Dollar Tree red felt heart, which you can see here. And then I had some felt in my stash, so I cut out a slightly larger blue felt heart, and that one is actually double layered. You can kind of see there. And then I just glued the Dollar Tree heart onto the blue heart, and at the end I stitched everything around. In the center, there's a fabric shaker that I made, and I attached some clear sparkly organza on top of the fabric, stitched around it with my sewing machine, and before I stitched the final section I just tucked in the little sequins and tiny little crystal seed beads. And then I added a pink bow and a jump ring on the bow with a tiny little dangle right here. So let me show you my process for creating the textural elements in the on the top here with the shaker. There are some examples here on my board, and these are cotton fabrics, 100% cotton fabrics, although you can really use whatever you like. And usually for my paper crafting projects, I don't use materials that are specific for fabrics. If I'm doing projects where I need longevity or washability or durability, I tend to stick with specifically fabric media, fabric paints, fabric dyes, and so on. But for paper crafting, this isn't something that you're going to wash or, really need any special durability for. So I just use regular, over-the-counter, store-bought craft paints, stains, sprays, dyes, gessos, all the inks, that kind of thing. So this is a piece of regular cotton fabric that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. And all I did was I sprayed the surface with some gold spray dyes, this sort of thing. And there are different brands you can pick up in any of the craft stores or online. This happens to be a Heidi Swap spray product, and just sprayed a little bit of that onto the fabric. And then on top of that, I put some Liquitex acrylic ink. It's water-based ink. This is gold. And just took the little eyedropper from the bottle and kind of splattered it onto the fabric and let it dry. So I can use this fabric now, for backgrounds on my cards, or to make little, stuffed pieces that I can share in swaps and that sort of thing. Here's another one. This is on a piece of just lightweight fabric, just a plain cream colored fabric. And then what I did is I took some craft paint and put it into just any little household container that has a flat bottom. And when you're working with your craft paints, let me just show you. Put a little bit in here, just a little. Okay, and because the surface of the tray is flat, I can spread the paint out a little bit. You can use a foam brush, a regular brush, or just, kind of tap it a little bit to get your paints distributed. And then you can use really any household found objects, or you can purchase foam stamps at the store. Here's a cork. There's cardboard in here, thread spools, and even this. I actually used this. These are those little clear tubes that come over when you buy a brand new paintbrush. So I save these, and then I can use them for stamping. But I did use this one on this fabric to do the little pink circles. And the cork is what I use to stamp the red on there. So just regular old craft paint was used for that. And then what you want to do is use your tray with the flat bottom, and then you're going to dip your printing tool into it. You don't want a lot of paint, so to spread it out a little bit helps a lot. And just, you're going to dip your printing tool into the tray. Make sure the bottom is nicely covered. All right, and then you can stamp onto your fabric. But I also would recommend that you put 1 or 2 layers of paper towel underneath your fabric if you're stamping on a firm surface, because that's going to allow just a little bit of give when you press the tool onto the fabric so that it will ensure coverage in that area with the paper towel underneath. Okay, so that is how we do this. These areas are slightly stiffer when they dry. If you use fabric paints per se, then they won't be quite as stiff. But for my purposes, this is fine. Okay, so there's that one. This one here, okay, you can see it's the same fabric as the red circle. Same kind of fabric. It's just like a lightweight cotton. And then I took a regular old craft store stencil, laid it on top, and then I used some more of the spray inks and just sprayed over it. This one has a little bit of a glitter look to it. I don't know if it shows on the camera, but that's kind of the effect that you're going to get with the glitter. You get a little shiny effect. This is really pretty, and this would be gorgeous. You can either tear it, you can see the raw edge here, or you can cut this and you can use it to make gathered ruching to put on your papercraft projects. You can use it to sew up or glue or stitch, or however you'd like to maybe make little fabric envelopes, or gather these up into little gathers, and then you can put this behind a rosette. So lots of good opportunities here to use fabrics and kind of punch up the texture in your papercrafts. This is a red Hobby Lobby cotton fabric, and I used an old set of cookie cutters. I've had these for years and I don't use them anymore for cookies, so I put them in my craft room. And I took one of the little hearts and I used some silver craft paint, and again, put the silver craft paint into my tray. Clean out your other colors. Put your silver paint in there, and then you can dip the cookie cutter in and stamp it onto your fabric. So this has a pretty silvery, glittery look to it. Okay. I would also recommend that if you do use cookie cutters, I like the edge that you hold. In other words, the edge that is not sharp gives a better imprint than the thin cutting edge. So you can just turn it upside down and print with it that way. Some of the other cookie cutters that you can buy at the store that are plastic have a thicker handle rim, and those also make really nice prints. You can also purchase those cheap little foam sponges that you can get at Dollar Tree, and you can cut them up into whatever shapes you like and use these foam stamps to do your printing with as well. So there's lots of possibilities. Thread spools make great found objects for printing. Really, hunt around your house and see what other things you can find that might be useful. Okay, so that is the process for creating printed fabrics. And these techniques can certainly be used on cardstock. And if you're like me, I have a number of paper pads that I look at and I think, why did I buy that? Or you no longer like the patterns inside, or you've had them for a long time, you just don't use them. Well, you can alter them and distress them. So here's an example here. And again, these are the same techniques that I use on the fabric pieces as well. And I'll set up, I'll take, say, a morning or an afternoon or even just an hour or so in my studio, and I'll set my table up with my wet media so that I can just go through and alter and change lots of things. Maybe I have some papers I want to distress, so I'll pull out the papers, and I'll pull out fabric scraps and other things that I'd like to distress, and do it all at once. Let everything dry, and then I can use them in my crafting afterward. So again, right here, you can see on the left side is the paper as it comes from the paper pad, and then on the right side is the distressing and altering that I did. So all I did for this one is I took some pale blue acrylic craft paint and a little bit of white that I had in my stash. I put them into my flat tray, and I spritzed the tray with just a little bit of water to liquefy the paint a bit and make it a little bit more transparent than what it was coming out of the bottle. And then I just brushed that over the right-hand side of the paper. And while it was wet, I then took out my Dilutions spray ink, and I just gave it a couple of spritz on the surface, and that's it. Then I put it to dry. You can lay these out on a piece of newspaper to dry. You can put them on, I actually, in my studio, I use these large foam core boards that I made up. You don't have to do this. This is just because when I'm doing a lot, you know, I like to have I have several of these, and they're quite large. They won't even fit on the camera, but they've been cut to size. These are about maybe 36 inches by 24. And then I cover them with the clear sticky back shelf liner. Or it has a sticky back, and I just cover the foam core with that so that it kind of repels any wet media that I'm using and keeps the foam core intact. And then you can or not add, I bought some vinyl at the fabric store, plain old tablecloth vinyl, just the thin stuff, and I will tape that. Sometimes I'll just tape it onto the board if I'm doing something really messy, just so that I have a nice flat surface to work on, and then I can lift the vinyl piece off and set it aside to dry, and then I've still got the board I can use for my next batch of items. So there's lots of different ways you can do it. You don't need this board. It's just something that I like to use when I'm doing large batches of altering. Yeah, newspaper's fine, whatever you have to cover your work surface. And I would also suggest that when you're working on these, especially if you're using spray inks or you're doing any kind of splattering, make sure that you cover your work surface completely with something, because I have found that the overspray from some of those products, which I don't even imagine that it's going to reach as far as it does, but the spray gets everywhere. So it's good to have a nice big space that you can spray on without worrying about getting it onto your other materials on your work table. So that's the first one. And then the second one is also from the same pad of paper. And this is what it looks like, or what it looked like. So it has, a plain background, this large scale, scrapbooking type design to it with a frame, and then these copper letters and the flowers. It just is not my taste. So I altered it, and this is what I ended up with. Okay, and you can see just barely a little bit of the letters peeking through, but I'm really not worried about that. What I did was I used, again, the white craft paint. Now, if you don't want a transparent look, in other words, if you want some of that background paper to peek through the way it does on this piece, then, if you don't want that, you can use a product called Gesso, and it's available in most craft stores. It's a very thick, opaque paint, which is a canvas ground. We would use that when we're preparing canvases to paint on, if you're making them from scratch, which I've done oftentimes in the past when I was doing a lot of oil painting and acrylic paintings. I would prepare the cloth canvas and stretch it over the frames with a special tool and staple the canvas on, and then you would prime the canvas with the gesso and let it dry. Then you would create your painting on top of that. So the gesso is a product that artists use for basically for preparing their canvases, but it's very thick, very opaque, and it will give a really good coverage on anything that you put over it or put it onto. So again, I used some white craft paint for the background to knock back the design of the paper, covered most of that with a sponge brush and some dabbing motions to kind of fill it in, and then just used a little bit of the spray, the craft sprays again, this type of thing. And then I also added, before I sprayed it with the craft paint, I used just a little bit of pink craft paint and my sponge brush, the one that I have in my tray here, and I watered down the pink paint and then just dabbed pink on top of the gesso, or not the gesso, the white craft paint, and then on top of that I did the purple spray. So this was the end product. And of course now I can cut this up and use it for backgrounds, or whatever I might want to use it for. So that's a great technique to use for those pads of paper that you no longer want to use as is. I've got another project here that I wanted to share with you that I used my printed fabric on. So there's the sample that I showed you earlier. And then I put it into this kind of a vintage look card. So this is an authentic paper in the center. I used this little cut apart and just glued it onto the card backing. And in between is that layer of printed fabric, and it has kind of a frayed edge to it and the pretty silver hearts. And then I just, pulled in a few little bits of trims and little cabochons, these little sequins that I purchased at Hobby Lobby the other day. And I thought that came out really cute. And I really like the colors together, and this textural element with the fabric really kind of punches up my paper crafting a little bit. I really like that. So that was the other little sample that I created. And I dug this out to show you just because it's Valentine's related, and I've been working on this for quite a while. It's, again, one of those projects that I pull out and put away and pull out and put away until I finish it. But I think it's really pretty, and even though it's not completely finished yet, I wanted to show you my in-progress work. This fabric has been sprayed with craft paints, and I just bought a spray bottle, put some craft paint into the spray bottle with some water, and then I sprayed the fabric. Let me get this out for you so you can see, with some different colors of craft paints. Here's some leftover. There's pink, there's sort of a sepia color on there, brownish. There's a little bit of purple, you can see. And this is what it looked like after it dried. So then I used this, just plain cotton fabric. I used this as the base for the heart. Okay, and then I had some heart fabric that I fussy cut this heart shape out of. And on the back of this fabric piece, and of course I did distress this fabric as well. You can see it has sort of a brownish tinge to it. It looks kind of antiqued. On the back side of this heart cutout, I stitched some netting. And the netting, of course this is going to be difficult to see on camera. Here's the netting. I also sprayed this with my paint and water mixture and let it dry. And then stitched the double layer of netting on the back side of the little heart cutout, put some cotton batting on it, and now I'm working the tiny seed beads around the edge. And once that's done, I'll stitch this all together, and then the back side of the larger heart also has some cotton batting, and I'm going to stitch this to the back piece and stitch it together, add some more trims and ruffling, and embellish this with some little cardstock bits and such, and see what I end up with. So it's kind of a work in progress. I'm kind of, as I'm working along on it, I'm planning it in my head, and I'll add something and then think of something else I want to add. So this project is not planned out quite ahead, the way I like to do with some of my projects. And in the artist world, we call that working haptically. Some artists tend to work more haptically, where they just pick up their materials and they just start creating. They don't have a plan in place yet. Other artists tend to work more what we call visually. So if you're working visually, then you tend to plan everything out ahead of time, and typically that is how I work. I'll work it out on paper first, and then I will start creating, pretty much based on the drawings and ideas that I have in my head. And again, you know, I'll alter things if I'm going along and I decide, oh gee, I don't really like the way that looks, I'll change it up. But anyway, that's a little bit on the side, that information. Also have a little rosette here that I'm working on. This is a cotton tape. Show you the back. It's not fabric, it's an actual cotton tape with a plain weave. And I, again, did some spraying on the surface. You can see the different colors. And then I'm gathering that up into a little rosette, and I'm going to put some paper crafted die cuts on the front of this. And here, again, are also some more trims that I painted and sprayed. This is Battenberg lace tape that I had in my stash. It's a little hard to see the colorations, but there's, you know, purple, pink, and tan on there. And I did the same thing with this white, well, it was white, rickrack trim. So that's been altered as well. Then I've got my assortment of tiny little seed beads that I'll be using to decorate the fabric heart as well. So this has been a fun project to work on as well. So lots of Valentine ideas here and projects going, and hopefully we'll get them all finished up. That's kind of the goal. So, all right. Well, I think that's it for today. I'm going to thank you for joining me, my returning subscribers. And if you're new to my channel and you're enjoying what you see, hopefully you'll hit the subscribe button. And I hope to see you all back again sometime soon, and hope that you have a really nice rest of the weekend. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.